Galileo Galilei put his life on the line by declaring that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but instead was one of several planets that circled the sun. The Trapdoor Theater presentation of Galileo, the play, stays close to the heart of Bertolt Brecht's script, but is a revised, challenging, and thought-provoking interpretation. Fragments of the original dialogue featuring translation by Charles Laughton are there, but the production has been reshaped and reimagined by director Max Truax into a postmodern avant-garde effort. This is Reno Lovison, executive producer at ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com, encouraging you to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast channel or website to be alerted when new content is added. Be sure to stick around to the end of this podcast to get some tips about where to eat before the show and an architecturally interesting building to see nearby. I'm delighted to report that I appeared in a production of Brecht's Galileo, traditionally staged at the Goodman School of Drama many years ago, and was anxious to see this adaptation. This production is a whole new approach and certainly worth seeing, particularly if you're interested in experimental theater. The storyline of Galileo is ostensibly about the struggle of the famed 17th century mathematician and scientist Galileo Galilei, who championed the then controversial notion that the sun, rather than the earth, was the center of our known universe, employing the new invention of the telescope to prove his hypothesis. For these heretical observations, he was threatened with torture and ultimately sentenced to house arrest, forbidden to continue his research. In reality, this is a story of unchecked centralized political and religious power that represses new ideas in order to keep the general populace ignorant and under control. Brecht realized this version of Galileo in the midst of World War II, which was largely precipitated by a rise in fascism throughout Europe. Echoes of intolerance continued to reverberate during the anti-communist movements of the late 1940s and 50s. In the United States, the Red Scare and McCarthyism was on the rise, making it no accident that Charles Laughton, a champion of modernist cinema and left-leaning causes, would be attracted to this message of Brecht's play, which he successfully introduced to a Los Angeles audience in order to reflect what was happening in the cultural climate of the day. This current version of the play, interestingly, is much about the vision of the director, Max Truax. It's notable that Truax graduated from Oberlin College, where he studied visual art, performance art, and choreography, as this production could be a master's thesis in the application of these art forms. David Lovejoy as Galileo is literally the person around whom this entire production revolves. The blocking in this modernist staging has the players often moving in elliptical orbits around each other, and most notably around Galileo himself, as he is the central force. At the beginning, Lovejoy is naked on stage, wearing only a flesh-colored dance belt for modesty. He's bathed in light, looking not unlike the sun itself. It soon becomes evident that, in essence, he, as Galileo, has exposed himself before the world. Any subsequent use of clothing is in direct relation to the degree of practical concessions he makes to the powers that be. Every time he agrees to be less vocal or do some work related to some practical application, he's rewarded with a shirt or a tie or a pair of pants. At times, when he becomes more defiant, he sheds an article of clothing. Joan Nahid is the blindfolded inquisitor who, ironically, is the one keeping the most watchful eye on Galileo. Seemingly everywhere and dressed in black, she is the void, chief tattletale, and the very essence of ignorance. Andrea, played by Shaul Modi, is Galileo's young protege, and the foil for presenting his ideas to the audience. He's the future. Galileo's daughter, Virginia, played by Genevieve Corkery, is a devoted Catholic. At least she's devoted to early morning visits to church and devoted to maintaining the status quo. Dressed in a floral blue dress and sporting blue eyeshadow, she represents the Earth. She has little interest in scientific thought, but she, like all of the planets, is caught within her father's gravitational force and reflects his light. Virginia's suitor, Ludovicio, played by Caleb Lee Jenkins, is equally shallow, but like a meteor, he is a potentially destructive force in the lives of father and daughter. Amber Washington is Fulgencio, a monk who sees the light and is at least intrigued by the teachings of Galileo. Played by Gus Thomas, Cardinal Barberini, who later becomes Pope Urban VIII, was himself educated in mathematics with a genuine interest in science. But as leader of the church, he has to navigate and reconcile his scientific insights with the church's position on the new concept of heliocentrism. After all, if the earth was not the center of the universe, how was this to affect the teachings of the church, and where might it lead? Dan Cobbler has an important role as a kind of one-man Greek chorus who fills many roles that would have been performed by multiple actors in a more traditional performance. He's the voice of commerce who sees the practical applications of new ideas, but who also must avoid harm, being careful not to get too close to the sun. Cobbler's performance has a comical element that offers some respite from what could become a most oppressive topic. Largely done in contemporary attire, or lack thereof, with costumes by Rachel Sepimniewski. Truax also employs the use of several black and white vintage television sets, displaying only static. Various people with influence carry them about and use them to communicate their thoughts to those in power. Integration of multimedia is a feature of the modern epic theater movement, as is social or political commentary, as well as breaking the fourth wall by speaking directly to the audience, which the cast does very effectively, challenging us to consider the lessons we've learned. Alluded to earlier, this production exploits highly choreographed movements. The players are very nearly always in motion, not unlike the motion of the planets, giving this an almost musicless ballet quality. Galileo is often stationary, at which times he might strike a quite stylized pose. Notably a time where Lovejoy in his nakedness is bent at a 90-degree angle, looking quite like Atlas carrying the weight of the world on his back. The backdrop for this performance, designed by Marie Vesky, is a multitude of sheets of black paper filled with notations written in white, no doubt representing the many thoughts of the scientific master. From a distance, the white scribblings on the black paper have the effect of stars in a night sky. Likewise, there's white chalk-like mathematical and scientific graffiti on the floor, eliciting the effect of being surrounded, indeed engulfed, within the mind of the genius. I recommend this strongly for those who are looking to experience something a little more out of the ordinary, as well as those looking for an intellectual experience that will have you thinking about this performance for some time to come. Galileo is presented by Trapdoor Theater, 1655 West Cortlandt, Chicago, through June 14, 2025. Running time is 90 minutes with no intermission. Tickets and information can be had at trapdoortheater.com or call 773-384-0494. I'll put a link on our website. Trapdoor Theater is an intimate, roughly 75-seat theater inside the back of Mabel's Table, an American bistro and bar, though the theater is also accessible through a narrow gangway, providing a separate entrance. My wife and I arrived early to have a light meal before the play. We were served by Bailey, who was very attentive and personable, providing a particularly friendly vibe. Julie and I each had a glass of red wine and opted to share a refreshing beet salad and 2 small plates. The first was crispy fried coconut shrimp, and the other was a delicious portion of 2 large meatballs that really might have been the best meatballs I've ever had. Ample in size, fluffy, not too bready, in a creamy tomato sauce with plenty of Parmesan. This was the way my dad liked his sauce. Not too red, he would say. The sauce should be more orange, not bright red, mostly because that's how his northern Italian mother, my grandmother, would make it. I think he would approve. Mabel's Table and her meatballs are highly recommended. The experience of the combo restaurant and bar provides a perfect dinner theater experience with no need to rush or park twice. By the way, I got a metered street parking spot exactly in front of the venue. This is a quiet little architecturally interesting section of Bucktown, just to the west of Ashland Avenue and I-94. Actually, keeping with the theme of Galileo, after the play, I strongly urge you to take a stroll 1 block further west to take a look at St. Mary of the Angels Catholic Church on Hermitage Avenue. The magnificent building with its domed roof, massive stairs, huge pillars, and bas-relief panels is brightly lit at night and a sight to behold. Be sure to look for our video or podcast related to Pope Leo XIV's relationship to Chicago, as well as reviews of other plays and things to do in Chicago. Pope Leo was trained as a mathematician who hopefully will continue to see that the infinite universe is large enough to encompass both science and religion when viewed through a wider lens. This is Reno Lovison, executive producer at ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com, encouraging you to please like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast channel or website to be alerted when new content is added. And as always, if you need assistance with marketing, video production, or video editing for your business or organization, check out renoweb.net. While you're there, take a look at the information about how to create your own video memoir to preserve your personal life story.